Game over, man. Game over.
Johnny. You're gonna need a big approach. So serious. Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for December 28th, 2025, and I'm J.D. Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Thanks for joining us this week, everybody, where we had no other choice than to talk about the great Park Chan-wook. He is back. Back
You
in
have
the
to talk
fold?
about this, man. We don't have a choice. You have to.
We don't.
He makes a
You have
movie.
to.
You have to. Honestly,
Yep.
anytime a big South Korean movie comes around, you have to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're a fan of Park Chan-wook, as we are. The man is a legend. Love his work. Always doing interesting things as a filmmaker. And he is back once again. No other choice. This film premiered at Venice, I believe, back in August. And it was nominated at the Golden Globes for 3-4 different things.
Yeah, what was it nominated for again? That's kind of wild for a movie like this to get that.
There was Best Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy.
That's
Best
insane.
Foreign Language Film, and Best Actor in a Motion Picture or Comedy.
That's wild that it got that kind of representation.
It did. And then it was, of course, the South Korean entry for Best International at the Oscars, where it was shortlisted. It did make the short list.
Oh, it's going to be nominated.
Yeah, it's going to be nominated. And it's one of those things when Ryan McQuaid was on the show a few weeks ago, I had even asked him if this film has an opportunity for Best Picture because Neon has all those great foreign language films this year, Sentimental Value, The Secret Agent, and a few others. And they're going to get at least 3 in for Best Picture, not just international feature, but for Best Picture. No other choice is that one where it's like, could they get a 5th? It's probably not going to go that far, but it's going to get in for international. For
the
sure.
talk of the town, if you will, as far as some of these foreign language films that could potentially get nominated for Best Picture, the talk does seem to be a bit stronger for movies like Sentimental Value and The Secret Agent. I think they're more... I don't want to say they're more favorited because all of these movies are very much loved, critically speaking, but they definitely seem more well seen by voting members, if that makes sense. So I think they're definitely more likely than something like No Other Choice, which is admittedly for some people probably a harder movie to stomach, as we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fair. I think there is more of an accessibility to some of those others than what we see with Park Chan-wook. But that's what I love about Park Chan-wook is that he's not afraid to be a little provocative.
His movies are wildly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I
Very
mean,
much so.
in a way, you might be able to argue that Old Boy is the most uncomfortable movie ever made.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Especially
that
given that
goes.
twist at the end. Unbelievable. But like Lady Vengeance, what we see with Stoker and its kind of weird plot mechanics, The Handmaiden is great. Certainly not going to be for everybody. Same thing with Decision to Leave. I mean, he's always doing fascinating stuff.
What is your favorite Park Chan-wook film? Is that an easy question for you, or do you have to think
No.
about that for a little bit?
I can sit here and say that I think Stoker is one of his most underrated. I do think that.
I think that's his most interesting because
I love that movie.
that
and not
was
a lot
kind of
others do.
at the time it was kind of marketed as, oh, here's a big international filmmaker making his first English language movie. And a lot of times when that happens, they tend to adhere to the rules of Hollywood a bit more often, that it kind of stifles their creativity that you know them for.
Yeah.
But that still feels mostly like a Park Chan-wook film.
Yeah.
And
I
I like that
agree
about it. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, that film gets quite bizarre at times
Yeah.
and certainly uncomfortable, if that's the word we're going to use to define his movies.
Sure.
It definitely gets uncomfortable in that regard. I mean, I always think of that one as one I champion just because there's less people that do so. But I mean, it's hard to deny the prowess of Old Boy. Really love The Handmaiden. it might come down to those two as far as his best movies go. I'm loving Decision to Leave more and more as I think about it. No Other Choice, for reasons we'll get into, is entered the mix in a big way. So it's hard to say at this point, as we sit here at the end of 2025, it's probably The Handmaiden and Old Boy. It comes down to those two. I hate to be a little bit cliche in that regard, but
Yeah. Sometimes what's good is what's
probably where
good.
I'm at. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it is The Handmaiden. I think that's one of the 10 best movies of the 2010s. Decision to Leave might actually be my second favorite, so it's weird to say that my two favorites of his are his two most recent up until this point, which might make it seem like I'm a recent convert of Park Chan-wook's, but I'm not. I just think there's an almost Hitchcockian sophistication to those two movies, and there's something so sad about those two movies as well. There's a new phase happening with Park Chan-wook that I felt like was reminiscent in those two films specifically, and we see that a lot, right? When filmmakers still retain their usual tendencies, but they kind of veer into a new world, if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
think of that, every filmmaker kind of has that transition point. I think of someone like, let's say, David Fincher. I would argue that transition point was when he made Zodiac, right? And then his movies got a bit more formal. There are things that shifted about them. And I feel like Park Chan-wook's version of that is maybe The Handmaiden. And he's kind of in this new phase of his career that I think was so beautifully reflected in movies like The Handmaiden and Decision to Leave. I think those are my two favorites, weirdly.
And I think that's perfectly fair. I mean, you can definitely see him veering in a little bit of a different direction from a filmmaking perspective for sure. Like tonally, in terms of his storytelling approach, I think those two films very much fall into that Park Chan-wook ethos, but he's certainly doing something different. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But that's not to say for me, I don't think one version is necessarily better
No,
than the other. They're just
No.
a little, he's not putting himself into a box, and he's certainly challenging himself. And I do love that about Park Chan-wook.
I'd say those two films are maybe a bit bigger when compared to the other two, and maybe do a few newer things with the camera that we haven't seen him do before. But that's usually something he's always doing. He's always experimenting with some form of cinematic language that, for reasons we'll talk about here once again, there's always something in every one of his movies where I sit back and go, I have never seen a director do that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of his thing. I feel like if there's one way I can describe Park Chan-wook, it's that. He does one thing in every movie that I've just never seen a director do, and that's awesome.
And I think that's what I love so much about Stoker, and I do wish that it got a little bit more love, because Stoker to me is kind of the transition point in the sense that it's a bridge between the two. There's a lot
That's
of
fair. That's very fair, actually.
the 2000s Park Chan-wook, but in terms of this new Park Chan-wook, when we're talking about cinematography and especially editing and how he's like telling stories these days, I mean, a lot of that is in Stoker.
That's actually a great point. You know, that there's a lot that happens in Stoker that if he hadn't made the movie at that time, he would not have been able to make The Handmaiden into what it was. Yeah. That's a very fair point.
Yeah. It's almost like he used that film as an experiment of sorts.
Like a trial run of sorts.
Like a trial run, yeah.
Because they are kind of similar aesthetically.
English language film, people might dog on it more anyway just because it's English. Let's do some interesting things and see how it goes.
But actually, no, there are some aesthetical similarities between Stoker and The Handmaiden. It's not just in the period details of those two movies, but there are some formal choices in both of them that are pretty similar. No, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah. So, I think that's just why I keep going back to that movie. But I mean, that's not to say like his Vengeance trilogy or however that's being labeled these days. I mean, I do really like it. Especially Old Boy, but I do like Sympathy, Mr. Vengeance. I think was in my top 20 for its year.
I think that one might be my favorite of those three movies.
That's fair. Like I don't blame anyone for that at all. I think the really the only difference for me is I feel like Old Boy is a little bit more sophisticated from a craft perspective for me.
Fair.
But there's like both of them are great. Like I wouldn't blame anyone for that at all. And I just love the weird ambitious pulls in Old Boy as well.
Yeah.
Like again, it's kind of trite to say now, it's been talked to death, but like on its own terms, it's just one of those you never see coming in a million years, and it's so effective. So it's a great storytelling exercise, and I just love how contained it is too, for the most part. But yeah, he is branching out since Stoker to tell more expansive stories and experiment further. And that's just what makes him one of my favorites,
Yeah.
honestly.
Haven't seen Joint Security Area from the year 2000. Also haven't
Yeah.
seen his
Yeah.
what's his cyborg movie? What's it called? I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay. That's what it's called. Haven't seen that either. Still a little bit
Yeah.
of homework I need to do. I wouldn't call myself an expert on Park Chan-wook, but what I
Yeah.
have seen, he has certainly fascinated me.
Yeah, I haven't seen them all, but I've seen a majority of his
Yeah, same here.
directorial efforts, for sure.
Yeah, I think I've seen maybe all but 2 or 3, something like
Yeah.
that.
That's exactly where I'm at as well. So, and I love him. Certainly one of my favorites. Anytime he has a new movie coming out, interest peaked. I am wholeheartedly there. So,
Yeah, there's something in the water there in South Korea where filmmakers are just doing things that almost seem illegal here
I know.
in America.
Yeah. Like, I just don't understand how mainstream Hollywood can look at those movies and go, why do their movies look so much better than ours? Should we do something different? Like, they
Well-
don't ask themselves that question at all.
Thank goodness for Parasite for getting the Academy to
I know.
recognize how great South Korean cinema is.
I know, for sure. And it's probably why No Other Choice has at least any shot at all in terms of
Yeah.
Oscars. Otherwise, I don't know if it would. But
Yeah.
who knows? We live in a post-Parasite world, and that's all that matters. Okay. Let's dig into his latest. It is called No Other Choice. As you might imagine, it is directed by Park Chan-wook. It stars Lee Byung-hun, Sun Ye-jin, Park Hee-soon, Lee Sung-min, and a bunch of others. Forgive me for butchering those names, but that's our central cast here. If you're not familiar with No Other Choice, after being unemployed for several years, a man devises a unique plan to secure a new job, eliminate his competition. Boom, 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 boom. Okay.
Your plot, the reading of these plot synopses, JD. You're I love this thing you do. I love
appreciate
this
it.
thing you do sometimes
And
with
I
it.
try to put some effort into it. All right, Brendan, what did you think about No Other Choice?
So let me just say this: when it comes to my end of year homework, when it comes to trying to catch up on all these movies so I can do my proper presentation of my favorite movies of every year,
Yeah.
I normally don't like to give movies a rewatch. I like to craft it in the moment as what it is. So if there are any changes, I could talk about them maybe a few years down the road, because I genuinely believe in the idea that lists and your feelings on movies are designed to shift. They're designed to change.
Mm-hmm.
If there was one movie from this year, though, that I wish I was able to give a second watch to in preparation for its review, it is No Other Choice. And it's for these particular reasons. I didn't love this one as much as other Park Chan-wook films, but I don't know if I'm able to articulate why. For a very specific reason that I don't know if I'm able to find. Maybe we'll find it in this conversation.
Okay.
I didn't connect with this one as much as, say, The Handmaiden or No Other Choice, or not Other Choice, or Decision to Leave, or some films in the Vengeance trilogy. And maybe it's because, tonally speaking, this is a very different movie. In some ways, this kind of goes back to some of the earlier vibes of Park Chan-wook, just given the more comedic sensibilities. It makes for a very different experience when compared to something like Decision to Leave or The Handmaiden. And maybe I just wasn't quite ready for that. Maybe I just have a very particular relationship to his style that I'm more interested in, that those movies represented. And I say this begrudgingly because I still think this is a very good movie. This is one of these movies where I am probably still going to give a solid 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, just given my initial review of it, because there are things in this movie from a filmmaking standpoint that are just stupid. They're just absolutely stupid. Again, in true Park Chan-wook fashion, There are sequences here that I can't say that I've ever really seen a director do. And sometimes they're very simple. I thought about this during a particular moment when our lead character of Mansu, played by Lee Byung-hun, is walking up the side of this staircase of this building and eventually carries or holds this giant flower pot above him. The way the camera moves is unlike anything I've ever seen for a simple act of just walking upstairs. And then the way he lifts that giant flower pot above him and the camera lingers on the way the water just drips on him and the way the sound captures that is unlike anything I think I've ever seen before. It's as simple as that. And that's what makes this movie so effective as an aesthetic experiment. I want to watch this again. I really do, to see what it is that I might be missing as far as the story itself. And maybe it's because just given some of its comedic sensibilities, I found something a little bit more repetitive about this one when compared to some of his other films. And maybe that's it. So I say that begrudgingly, but I also say this as maybe a little bit of a to be continued because I do think I need to give this one a second go around. But I did overall like it because there are so many things about it aesthetically that make it one of the best crafted movies of the year, regardless of what it's doing underneath. I'm excited to see where this conversation goes. You might be able to help me find some of these things and maybe even find my maybe find my hidden relationship to this movie that I just haven't found yet. Maybe it's just not quite there yet. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
I am as well. I don't know if I'll be able to help articulate anything for you, but I can say this. I loved it. I loved this movie. I mean, as you might expect, it is one of the very best crafted films of the year. As you were just laying out there, the cinematography and editing here is just astounding. The transition work is once again absurd. There's just no one doing it like Park Chan-wook in that regard. From a visual cinematic perspective, every frame in this film is chock full of vivid color, assiduous detail, and sublime composition. It's also very funny and endlessly entertaining. There's a robust underbelly of irony and satire with this narrative, and it's full of these great little moments of humor despite its dramatic urgency with what we see on the surface narratively. And it is pretty bleak in the end. The final moments of this film are drowning in despondency and loneliness. It's quite extraordinary to see how Park weaves those tones here to make this experience seamless. The visuals and editing may be more noticeable, certainly there on the surface, but Park's tone management might be his most impressive trait here. And I think that's important because this film isn't reinventing the wheel in terms of its themes and commentary. In fact, so much of what we see here harkens back to, for me, Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. Anytime there's advancements in technology, there's always the fear of how it disrupts economic norms and personal insecurities. The industrialism of the early 20th century absolutely invoked those fears, and Modern Times captured it immaculately. Now, almost 100 years later, no other choices aiming at sites at automation and corporate consolidation, especially in the era of AI. It's about a system that discards loyalty the moment it becomes inconvenient. And when the fear of unemployment intersects with cutthroat competition for jobs, people do tend to lose their empathy real quickly. And so what we see in this film is the deconstruction of a family man who's willing to go to extreme lengths because he's made to feel disposable. It's a feeling that I think is immensely relatable at this moment in time, much like Modern Times was for those in the 1930s when things were rapidly changing then. Perhaps that's a big part of it for me, the timing of this film and when it comes out. And when you couple that with Park Chan-wook's filmmaking, I just think there's a lot to love here. Again, from a cinematic perspective, from a filmmaking perspective, I think that warrants a 4 out of 5 stars just on its own terms, as far as I am concerned.
That's fair. That's fair.
But I do love, again, that tone management that, to your point, harkens back to early Park Chan-wook in a way as well. And I just love the timing of when this film is coming out, because we are in the middle of, much like we saw with Modern Times in the 30s, in the middle of a quickly evolving world that is going to foster a lot of fear and paranoia and competition. And this film goes about denoting that in a very entertaining way, at least for me, but in a way that's surprisingly poignant as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well,
I mean, I loved it.
Well, Park Chan-wook's tone management, his ability to pull that off, is another one of his defining traits in all of his movies. And
Yeah.
if I have any issues with this movie and why it didn't connect with me as much as his others, tone management is certainly not the issue. If anything, if I were to maybe try to articulate it more, maybe it's just that the movie feels more interested, to me at least, in the staging of some of its comedic set pieces. You know, like you made the comparison to something like Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. I actually think that's a very good comparison. I didn't even think about that. But maybe this is a movie that I felt like was more interested in how it was trying to pull off the punchline as opposed to what was more underneath. And perhaps I just missed something. Maybe I need to give it more of a watch to find what those inner nuances are, because there's a lot about what this movie is doing, to your point, that I do think is quite fascinating. There's actually a lot of irony within this movie that I found incredibly interesting. The idea that our lead character of Mansu works for a company that is all about linemen and union workers that actually participate in the actual factory work itself in a blue collar kind of way. So it actually requires people to be very hands-on, yet it's also a company that is simultaneously destroying the environment. I love that idea. That's a very ironic idea. And the way that that idea crystallizes and adds even more irony to that, I think is kind of hilarious. So the whole idea that this capitalistic mindset that even when you win in the end, you ultimately lose. I think that's well communicated for sure. It's certainly not a new idea, but Park Chan-wook has a very quirky sense of humor that he sells that in a way that does feel kind of new. I just need to go back and revisit the film to see if I felt like it was more interested in the staging of those set pieces as opposed to some of these other things. And that's certainly not a bad thing, because those set pieces are well staged. There are some really funny sequences in this movie. This is a much funnier movie when compared to something like Decision to Leave or The Handmaiden.
Oh,
as
yeah.
quirky. Yeah. And that's why I made the comparison to maybe earlier Park Chan-wook films that have maybe more of that quirky sense of humor baked into those movies, whereas movies like The Handmaiden and Decision to Leave have it a little bit, but there's a classiness to those movies that separate them just a little bit that I think this movie's kind of disregarding, which I also appreciate. It could just be a simple case that I was not ready for it. I was not ready for that switch. So again, to be continued. Maybe I need to give this one another go.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. I think for me, I didn't really come in expecting it to continue the same tonal trajectory or the same filmmaking trajectory as what we had seen in The Handmaiden or Decision to Leave. That could be part of it. I don't really know. But I will say, I don't necessarily think you're wrong in the sense that there is a lot of attention put on the framing and composition and its comedic gags. I do think that is a lot of what's going on here, because again, this film isn't reinventing the wheel in terms of its thematic underbelly. It's ciphering it through a very timely prism, as I noted in my opening thoughts. And I think that's ultimately why it is poignant in the end, despite its humor. But at its core, it is a satire. And there is a lot of irony at play. And so Park Chan-wook focuses his energy on those setups and on those gags and making that feel as robust as possible. So what we get here are moments such as you noted with the flower pot and how that is conveyed from a filmmaking perspective. It is extraordinary. Or I think about the scene where he confronts one of the competitors for this job that he's going after. And that scene in and of itself, by the way, when he creates this fake company and has to determine the three people that he's going to go after, that whole sequence is pretty funny in and of itself.
That whole stretch, and then the way it leads into the confrontation with that first competitor, that whole stretch is my favorite stretch of the movie.
Yeah.
And maybe part of that has to do with a particular needle drop, an American music needle drop,
my
mind
gosh,
you.
it's so good.
It utilizes the song Hold On, I'm Coming by Sam and Dave, which when that happened, I thought, oh my God, this is the best movie of the year. And maybe it's just my connection
really
to that
good.
type of music and that type of genre, but that stretch is quite incredible. And I love how when he confronts that first individual of these three that he's targeting, I believe his name is Mr. Goo, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
It involves this man's wife. I'll simply say, without getting into specifics, he still tries to spare this man in a way by giving him the knowledge of what his wife is actually doing to him. So in a way, while he's going to do something really severely devastating to this man, he's still also trying to be sympathetic and kind towards him. So it's like he can't fully shed this humanity in a way. I think those are pretty interesting ideas that are well communicated here.
Yeah, and that is so much of the film, right? Because the opening of the movie is that classic setup of, I have the perfect life. I have this great job. I just got not this promotion, but he sent these gifts from his company that is indicative of him doing a really great job. So he's doing great. The company loves him. I have 2 kids. They're both wonderful. I have this great home. And it is very obvious what Park Chan-wook is doing there, setting up this man to fail.
This
Like,
man,
that's
he
ultimately what
gets
he's doing.
delivered the most beautiful looking piece of eel. It clearly showcases he is on the chopping block, right?
Exactly. And that's the irony, right? Because the next scene, he's essentially fired after getting this great, immaculate gift from his company.
Doesn't realize it's a parting gift.
No, doesn't realize that it's a parting gift. But tonally speaking, like, the film might as well has had this shiny glow around it as to be like,
Well,
this
it
is
kinda
all
does.
clearly a facade.
The movie does
'cause it takes
aesthetically
place
shift.
outside.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
during
but it actually
summer.
does have a glossiness to it that the rest of the movie doesn't quite have. So I don't think you're wrong in saying that. I you might say that facetiously, but I think that is pretty deliberate on Park Chan-wook's part.
Oh, and it might be because I do think there's quite an obviousness to what Park Chan-wook is doing there. He's not hiding the fact that he is setting him up to deconstruct him as it goes. And so he's this family man that loves his kids, loves his wife, loves this home that he's built for himself because it's his childhood home that he's added on to, that he's done his own personal custom additions to. So he loves his home. But because he's fired and things don't go well, they might have to sell the house. There's even a scene where one of his friends comes to look at it because he might buy it, which leads to another gag later on in the film.
Yeah.
But things are not going well. And so that is, of course, the irony. And Park Chan-wook is certainly not hiding from that. And so throughout the film, because he's wearing that satire on his sleeves, it's about how Man-soo stumbles from moment to moment as he engages in this cutthroat competition for seemingly the one job that's left that he is qualified for.
Yeah.
And that's another element to this film as well in terms of identity and how we are sometimes tied to what we do for a living. That is a big through line here as well that we can talk about. But in terms of the filmmaking and the gags that we see here and that attention to detail, I do love that because that first encounter when he goes to Mr. Goo's home and they have this 3-way scramble, we can say vaguely, a gun is involved, and the hilarity that comes out of that is quite incredible. But to your point, it's also a little bit unsettling how all of that crystallizes where Man-soo gives into his humanity, but what we see in the aftermath of it there's still violence to be had.
Yeah.
And so it's this mix of slapstick energy with real stakes and real consequences that I just find hilarious. Or I
Yeah.
think about the snake bite scene as well is another one of those silly, goofy moments here. But I think about the craft of it all, where Mansu is bitten, and another character that I'll remain vague for now. They go to suck the venom out of his leg. And then, like, as soon as we see it, there's a hard cut. There's a great cut to Mansu where he's still laying on his back. So it's that great transition of from one location to the next, but the framing is the same, which is clever.
Yeah,
But
that's
he's
good.
watching a video, and the video is all about how sucking venom out of the blood is actually a myth. There's no scientific credence to that at all.
Yeah, so now he thinks he's about to die.
Yeah. Which is just very funny.
Creates
So,
a
like,
great like analogy for this entire situation, right?
Yes.
There's
It's
some
just
obvious
brilliant.
symbolism there, and you're not wrong. What Park Chan-wook is doing here, he was perhaps a bit more subtle with what he was trying to communicate with movies like The Handmaiden and Decision to Leave. Those
Yeah.
were more art movies, right? This is certainly not that. And in a way, I do kind of appreciate that, even if there are some hidden dramatic nuances that I can appreciate here simultaneously that are certainly in his wheelhouse. Yeah, this is why I want to watch the movie again to see if I am still once again maybe more suffocated by some of those
Yeah.
set pieces as opposed to what's underneath. I don't want to
Mhm.
try and find those other layers. You know what this movie kind of reminded me of from earlier this year? It kind of reminded me of Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind, where it's bumbling idiots essentially acting out because of what they feel are reasons surrounding economic turmoil in some way or occupational turmoil. This is certainly more about what it means to define yourself as it relates to your job, which is a very relatable idea. But I was definitely reminded of that. But also in a weird way, this movie, No Other Choice specifically, is almost as if Park Chan-wook watched a movie like Office Space and was like, I want to make my own version
Yeah.
of that. It's definitely
Yeah.
it's a comedy. This is straight up a comedy, and perhaps I need to see it as that, and I can appreciate it more because of that.
Yeah, and it very much is a comedy. It is a very, very funny movie. It's a little akin to even One Battle After Another in that regard, in terms of tone and energy. And also, that's another film featuring a bumbling idiot whose identity is tied to his quote unquote job.
That's
which
also a
is
great
the
choice. Yeah.
revolution.
That's a great comparison once again, because as we talked about with that movie, One Battle After Another specifically, that's a movie that isn't all that deep as far as what it's suggesting politically, right? There's more to it than just that. So, okay, that's another fair comparison. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah, I was very much reminded of that film. And yeah, I mean, this is a film that, again, I don't think it's aiming for the same artistic depths of something like The Handmaiden or Decision to Leave, but there's a lot of artistry here. Again,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
cinematography is astounding. It's incredible.
There's
Frame here you can put on a wall.
There's an argument that this is the best looking movie of the year.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. This, in a world where justice is real, and I don't know if we do live in a world where justice is real, but if we did,
No, we don't.
this film should be up for best cinematography. It should be up for best editing, production design. Like, it has so much incredible craft to this film. It is simply one of the best crafted films of the year, full stop. Regardless of what you think about its satire and how effective it might be as a comedy, I tend to think it is really great. But all of that aside, it is, like, just from a cinematic perspective, it is undeniable in terms
I
of
agree.
the craft. Again, I think there's a lot to just love about that. And I think that's also why the comedy here is so effective to me, or why the satire is so effective to me, because Park Chan-wook is putting a lot of effort into making the gag reel here as cinematic as possible, to make it as effective, as distinctive as possible. So this isn't just any other satire. And maybe there are a lot of other films where the satire is rooted in writing. Maybe it's rooted in performance and character. Here, the foundation of it begins with the filmmaking process.
That's another fair argument that I didn't really think about. That we don't often see movies that function as satires, where the satire is primarily communicated through visual or visual language, and that is
that's
the
what
case.
this is.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah. Another example of that is the second encounter, I'll say. And this leads to a moment where Mansu buries a body in his own backyard, mind you, underneath this tree. And there's symbolism to that as the film goes.
Sure.
But the very next moment, so he buries this body under the tree, the cops show up on his front door the next day. And there's that great moment on Lee Byung-hun where it's almost as if he simply gives in. I've been found out. This has been a fun run, but it's all over. And it turns out the cops are not there for him, even though he walks to the cop car like he's about to be arrested himself.
I will say that did make me laugh because he has his hands out like he's putting handcuffs on.
Then has to like quickly hide them. Like,
and it's like, oh shit, no, okay, we're here for something else. But okay, like I will give you that as well. That's another thing I did appreciate, that it's not just his reaction where he thinks that the cops are there for him. It's almost like this moment of relief. Yet, ironically, he should still be devastated because the cops are there for his son, right?
Yeah, for son, yeah.
And yet, here they are here for another family member of his that should still devastate him, and it becomes a moment of relief for our main character. That's, I'll give you that. That idea is kind of hilarious.
Yeah, it is very funny. And he does have, again, to the tonal balancing of the film, he does have a poignant reaction once he finds out that it's his son that is in trouble. And so on their way to the station, he's allowed this moment to talk to him on the stairs. And he does give this empowering speech to him about how we are here for you. We're going to help you get through this. Or I think about the moment, I believe this is after that whole situation where he finds out that his son has been hiding these cigarettes from him and his wife. And instead of getting mad at him or throwing them in the garbage, he simply confronts him in this very charming way where he just gives them back to him. He's like, you can throw these away. You can do whatever you want with them. Totally up to you.
Do you think the Mansu of before carrying out these hideous crimes could be able to relate to his son in that way? I guess that's what I'm asking is, like, do these horrific actions that Mansu partakes in, does this weirdly toughen him up to make him a better father at the same time?
Well, that's an interesting argument and perspective to have. I don't know. I think is the answer to that on a first watch. And the only reason I hesitate is because in that opening scene, it's quite evident that he already is a family man, loves his wife, loves his kids, has the perfect life. Again, that's what the film wants to evoke there. So you get the sense that he's already a great father, but to your point, some of the more intimate moments that arise here, does it allow him to go to deeper places because he's found himself in these precarious situations? Maybe. It certainly could have. But again, on the flip side of that, while he's become perhaps a better father, he's become a worse husband. And I have thoughts about that as well.
I don't know if we slightly differ on this, but at least in the opening of the movie, I wouldn't say he was a bad family man per se, but I weirdly think these horrific experiences he chose to partake in weirdly made him a more attentive father. I think at the very least, I think at the very least at the beginning, he may have been more invested in the idea of being a big and rich family man because of his occupational status and what he saw himself as. So then for a brief moment, when that's ripped away from him, his escapade, if you will,
Yeah.
forces him to look outside that particular box, which is
Yeah, that's fair.
also very
Yeah,
ironic. And I
could
think it's
buy
also
that.
and I think
Yeah.
it's also very ironic given the way that the film ends, which I won't get too far into, but in a way, you can almost argue that Mansu goes through this circular arc and by the end doesn't really learn or grow at all.
Mhm.
And that's likely the point, how his desperation
Yeah.
to provide for his family ends up being his simultaneous downfall. There was a moment
Yeah.
where being stripped away from that allowed him to focus on other things that may have been important. Also, getting there was very, you know, not the best way to go about it.
Yeah.
But it's I think there's a lot of irony in this movie,
There-
which I do
there is.
appreciate. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is ultimately, I think, the point the film is making. Even if he does become a better father in this process, he clearly becomes a worse husband, and
Mhm.
that trajectory is quite heartbreaking, especially when you consider that party sequence. Was it a work party? I'm trying to recall. There was
Yeah,
some sort of like dress up party they were supposed to go to.
it was some costume party where I guess they
Costume
were
party.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were going as John Smith and Pocahontas or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes,
And I
that his
believe,
wife had set up. She had gotten
yeah,
the costumes and everything.
yeah,
And because of everything that he's involved in, he mostly misses it. Now he gets there late,
mhm,
and that whole sequence is quite provocative where he sees his wife dancing with another man. They go home, they argue. It's kind of tragic and heartbreaking. And there's also that moment after the third encounter near the end of the film where it just seems as if everything is unraveling in a lot of ways. And then once the competition of it all is crystallized, then we see where he lands. To your point, mostly what we see with Mansu is a man recoiling in despondency and isolation and loneliness. And it highlights the human cost of that cutthroat competition and what winning says or what it doesn't say.
yeah.
And even if it was worth it from a financial stability perspective, I do think the film is very much suggesting that the process leaves you lost or that the cost is very high.
Yeah.
You are not necessarily the same person on the other side.
Yeah.
And so I do think those final scenes are striking in that regard. Even if the film isn't doing anything, it's not inventing a new idea.
It doesn't
but in
teach
terms
anything
of-
new.
Exactly. But in terms of how we get there, the execution, so to speak, I think is so good that it's still ultimately quite effective. And when you couple it with the performances as well, I did find myself sitting here thinking like the economic times we find ourselves in, coupled with AI and how that's changing things. I find this film extremely relevant given our current economic status and where things are seemingly going.
Yeah.
So like, if anything else with Park Chan-wook, it's obviously well crafted, but I think the release of this is pretty impeccable. The timing of this release.
And as we talk about this further, I'm looking at the movie, I'm looking at the cast here. I think I found the in, so to speak, as to what's going to make me like this movie more when I give it a rewatch. Because there's a lot that is being praised about Lee Byung-hun's performance here, and he is quite good here. I do agree. I think I think he is very effective. I think it's a very comedically well-timed performance as well. It is also a very
Yeah.
cold and despondent performance, and I say that complimentary because I think that is
Yeah.
ultimately the point of the Mansu character.
Yeah.
I think if I revisit this movie and try to watch it from the perspective of his wife, Miri, played by Sun Ye-jin,
Yeah.
that might be the in I'm looking for. Because I think she is, in many ways, the yin to that character's yang.
Oh,
she's
yeah.
she's the
They're
soul of this
complete
movie.
juxtaposition.
She
Yeah.
is the soul. She's the human soul of this movie
Yeah.
that ultimately experiences the heartbreak that we are designed to understand and feel.
Yeah.
And I think if I try to revisit this movie, really looking at it through her eyes, I might find something here. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I think she gets lost in the shuffle. I think, if anything, I was just more maybe distracted by some of the film's more comedic acrobatics. that I didn't
Yeah.
really think about her performance. But if I do, I might be able to find another side to this thing that I was ultimately missing on the first go round.
Yeah, I think that is a great approach. And I do think she's very, very good here. You are right. She is the total antithesis to what we see with Mansu. And what's incredible is how we see that very early on,
Hmm.
despite that almost sense of unity of that opening scene. I guess there is a sense of unity, but it's quickly deconstructed when he loses his job and she pragmatically takes the reins and is like, okay, we're selling this off. The piano's got to go. This has got to go. And eventually we've used up all of our money. The house has to go. Don't care. Doesn't matter the sentimental value. We are not in a Joachim Trio film. The house got to go. Okay. And it's totally the other extreme from Mansu.
Yeah.
And she does become the emotional nucleus of the film as it goes, for sure.
Sure.
And she's constantly having to react to Mansu and these weird exploits that he finds himself in. I do think that comes through quite vividly, especially near the end of the film, like as it veers into the third act and when she comes back into the fold. It's pretty heartbreaking. And that whole costume party sequence, like her reaction to that, I think is genuinely devastating.
There's
Very
a
good stuff.
shot. There's a shot involving her that almost made me want to consider her as among the best supporting actress performances of the year. And in many ways, she still is, but I almost would have considered her in my 5. And the one shot is when I'll simply say she is digging up something in the backyard, and there's
Yeah.
what feels like a realization in what she finds, only for her to then communicate that to her son in a way that's not what we think that she finds. But
Yeah.
in the end, we think that maybe she's just hiding something, that deep down she knows all along what is going on here. But the facial recognition of what that could potentially be in that one shot is
It's
it
great.
weirdly might be my favorite shot of the movie. It weirdly
It's
might be.
very good. It's very good. And a film full of just incredible frames. Just very, very good stuff.
Yeah, that's why if I sound dismissive of this movie, I'm not. It's too well made to be dismissive of. I just need to give it another go around to see if some of its comedic acrobatics were ultimately a little too distracting for me, and if I found them a little bit repetitious, because there is something about this movie that is more interested in that staging.
Yeah.
And if there's just an aspect of Park Chan-wook I'm more interested in, maybe it simply comes down to that. But I do want to give this one a revisit. Of all the movies from this year that I think I need to revisit in order to give my year-end list proper justification, this is the film. This is the film I need to give a second go around.
Yeah. I'd be curious to hear what that's like for you.
I might refuse to log this on Letterboxd until I do, just because I need to do that. And if ultimately I find myself at a point where I'm ready to say it is one of the best movies of the year, I will link to this review and say, listen to why I was wrong in the first go around.
Yeah, I mean, even as it is now, you've come into this with a sense of curiosity and wanting some sort of I don't want to say closure, but some sort of finality on where you're going to lean, I guess, with this film. And I think that there's a lot to appreciate there, especially in a day and age where everyone's like, this is how I feel and I'm not going to change no matter what. And
Look,
like,
I'm sorry, but film critics are not that smart. I'm just gonna say it sounds mean to say, but
well, I don't even know if it's film critics. I just feel like people in general are just so stubborn and hardened and are unwilling to adapt or change their views, or like the discourse on films in general can sometimes be a little too black and white. Like films change. The way you feel about films often change.
yeah,
Not
well,
always, but often.
and that's why I don't like giving movies a revisit in the same year that they come out. Like, I like my year-end list nowadays to be a reflection of where I am at that point. So if it completely shifts in a few years, that's something I can talk about. Like, I think that's an interesting idea.
I agree. I agree. Sometimes I feel like I have to indulge in it when a film is getting so heavily praised, like a Mad Max Fury Road, that maybe I missed something.
You know what? That
So
this is my Mad Max Fury Road of 2025. The way you felt about that movie,
yeah,
you liked it but didn't fully love it, and then you gave it a rewatch. You're like, nope, I missed it. I
completely
missed
changed
it.
it. Yeah,
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 yeah. This
exactly.
might be that
So
movie for me.
it very much could. You never know. But just in terms of frames that stand out, and I do agree with you that one with the wife as she's digging under the tree is really incredible. One of my favorite frames of this film in the entire year is this stationary shot where Mansu is in the woods spying. He's spying on Mr.
Hmm.
Gu and his wife.
Hmm.
And there comes a moment where he's found out. So he is running from, I believe at this point in the story, he's running from Mr. Gu's wife, who has a gun and she's
Yeah,
chasing after him.
yeah.
And there's this stationary shot where on the right side of the frame, they're coming down this hill that is just in the woods. And on the left side of the frame is the road. And we can see that his car is parked there. So the shot begins with Mansu on the right side of the frame simply running in these woods and it's all this fall foliage, right? So you have these
Hmm.
beautiful yellow leaves that are just highlighting the frame, but there's also a bunch of green as well.
Hmm.
And so he's running down the right side. And then there's this turn, this sharp turn where he comes down the right side of the frame, coming toward the camera. And then when he gets close to the camera, that's where this is the sharp U-turn down a hill to his car. And we all see this take place fully in the frame. He's coming down, makes this giant U-turn, almost stumbles and falls. And
Yeah.
as he's doing this, we also see Mr. Gu's wife behind him, chasing after him with the gun. So just in terms of the shot, stunning. You got the woods, the yellow fall foliage there. You get a little bit of brown in terms of like the wooded path that we see there as well. Incredibly evocative in terms of the shot. And again, just the framing of it with the path inside the woods on the right. You got the road on the left side of the frame. Just a beautiful framed shot. And then in the middle of all of that is just this comedic lunacy, just this chase sequence that is
Yeah.
just very funny in terms of what's happening. So it's just this perfect concoction, this quintessential moment that defines this movie in terms of craft, composition, editing, and it's very funny satire that I
Yeah,
love.
well, and maybe this is where your comparison early on to Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times has more validity. And honestly, if you're going to use a movie like that as reference, at least you're pulling from what might be the greatest movie ever made, right? So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I just this definitely has Chaplin energy at times for sure.
it is pretty
Um,
Chaplin-esque. Yeah, and maybe that's the thing. Maybe that
mhm,
just threw me for a loop. I just,
yeah,
I wasn't quite ready for that.
yeah, because like I think about that second confrontation, the second person that he goes after,
Hmm.
there on the wet rainy road. Like when the action begins, again, he is not a hitman. He is not a professional. So it does not start off well at all. Like he
Hmm.
eventually achieves what he needs to there, but it's like the first shot goes off and it's not on target at all. And
Well,
it
it
becomes this Chaplin-esque fight back and forth that's just
Well,
it's just very good.
there's also something kind of sad about that when given the scene that
It
precedes
is.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the scene
And
at the
that's true. And
store.
that's
Yeah.
that's the
And that
great complication to it as well
yeah.
because the scene before in the store does create a bit of a bond between those two, like a genuine bond between those two characters in a way. But
Mhm.
again, it just speaks to the cutthroat competition that's at play and
Yeah.
how one loses their humanity in it because despite that genuine connection that he had with the guy, at the end of the day, there's only one job. Do you want it or
Mhm.
not? And
Yeah.
what does it cost you in the end?
Yeah.
And the ripple effect of that choice, because the second body becomes like it tethers to that moment you were just talking about with the
Mhm.
digging under the tree. So
Yeah.
it just becomes this huge pivot point in the film in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I will say the thing about this movie that maybe made me laugh the most, but it also came with this huge sting of realism, especially given how people tend to define us as our jobs. It's when Mansu first loses his job, he goes to what is essentially group therapy of sorts, or a self-help group about what it means to find your new job. And the things that he is taught, he's basically like tapping his forehead in a repetitive way to program into his conscience, I will find a job in 3 months. That's
Yeah.
what he's being told.
Mhm.
And for anyone out there, myself included, who has ever been laid off from a job, that is a very stressful time. So when I saw that in the movie, that
Mhm.
is one of the most horrific things I think I've seen all year. So,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
okay, so I'm starting to come around on this thing. So
Good to hear. Yeah, I mean that is a pointed moment in this film, and it clearly has an effect because he seems to believe it, genuinely believes that,
Mhm.
oh, it's no problem. I'll have a job in 3 months. We got enough to get
Or
by.
or just a whole misguided nature that, "Oh, I have to find a job by this time, otherwise there's something wrong with
Mhm.
me," right?
Yeah. And again, I know that this takes place overseas, obviously, with this being a South Korean film, but in the United States, I think I read a stat, something around the fact that the effect of 70% of those with bachelor's degrees do not have a job.
I
It's
mean,
something
yeah.
around that.
It's something
Around,
around there. I think I saw a similar stat. I don't know if it was the exact same stat that you saw, but I do know that layoffs are at a bit of a high.
yes.
When it comes to the way that employment works, especially post COVID, there tends to be this pendulum, right? And this pendulum being when the employers have control or when the employees have control. And after
Yes.
COVID, there was a moment when those of us who were job seekers had more control, because then all of a sudden jobs were available, right? And now we're at a point where jobs are no longer available for those who are seeking jobs, who are sadly unemployed, it becomes a completely different animal as to who has control in this situation, and that's why layoffs spike as the way that they do.
Yeah.
And that affects those who have bachelor's degree, to your point. So there's a lot we
Yeah.
could talk about what the employment market is nowadays, but it's
It's
not
tough.
favorable. It's not favorable right
It's
now.
not favorable. The economics are terrible. And then on top of that, you have automation and AI taking over everything. So the jobs are slimming down. They're impossible to find for a lot of people,
Yeah.
which leaves you in this position of feeling disposable, as we see with Mansu here. And that can drive a person to these extremes. Now, of course, this is acting in a satirical way and it dramatizes everything to the extremes. I
Mhm.
don't hope that everyone is going to the measures that we see with Mansu here, but
Mhm.
it certainly invokes the idea and that feeling
Sure.
of desperation that a lot of people are absolutely experiencing right now. Again, going back to the timing of this release, I just feel like that adds a certain element to the weight of this film as it stands currently. But I think on its own terms,
Mhm.
and just like the way it handles those ideas, again, going back to that Roger Ebert thing of not what a film it's about, how it's about,
Yeah.
doesn't matter to me that this film isn't reinventing those themes at all as much as
It's about how it makes you feel.
it's how it taps into those themes here.
Yeah.
It's done in a very Park Chan-wook way that is clever, it's emotional, it's funny, it's all of the above. And then, and all of that emotion is funneled through that great filmmaking. And the
Mhm.
filmmaking here is important in also heightening those emotions. So
Yeah.
you can't have one without the other.
Mhm.
And that's just the brilliance of this film, and it's what makes it, at least for me, one of the best movies of the year. Yeah, I deeply love the film a lot. I
I
think it's
can't wait
really great.
I can't wait to watch it again. So this is one I think I'm going to prioritize a revisit before we get to our award show.
Nice. I'd be curious.
I think it's the only one I'm going to have to, and I think it's the only one that I want to. I feel pretty good about the majority of the films I saw this year. Some might change as we would expect, but this is the one I think genuinely needs one from me. It requires one. And watch it end up in my top 5. Just like watch.
I wouldn't be
happen.
surprised. I honestly wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised at all. The last thought I have on this, unless there's other elements you want to get to, I mentioned this earlier, but I do want to reiterate here once again that I think a big part of this as well for Mansu is the idea of work identity and masculinity. I think that's a big element to the character as well. And it's something that his wife brings up at some point in the film as well. In fact, I think it's not just him. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Goo's wife says something along these lines. Maybe I'm conflating.
There are some parallels between the two of them, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, in fact, now that I think about it, I do think that Mr. Goo's wife actually does say something to this, because he also worked at the paper mill for years and years and years. And she, at one point, berates him for not getting another job in a different industry. But he's so defined by it. And it's the same thing with Mansu. He's so defined by his 25-year tenure that he doesn't even consider anything else.
Which I think is a very interesting and often relatable topic. The idea of the career shift, the career change, right? It's something that we don't talk about nearly enough. There's something weirdly taboo about that, even here in the States, culturally speaking. And I think this movie does speak to that. So yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, and that is in a lot of ways at the heart of the violence, because these men are so tethered to that identity, they're not willing to look elsewhere. And so they're all vying for the one job. Maybe they could relinquish that ego, go look for something else, but nope, it's this one thing. And as a result, and that's the one thing they're after, the only thing you can do is play the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
And in this case, the stakes are literally life and death. That's how this game is being played, because there's only one role. So at the end of the film, when we see who wins and who loses, it simply leaves them in this spot of loneliness, as we noted earlier. But all of that comes back to work identity and masculinity and their unwillingness to venture into something new.
Sure.
And I guess as you get older, maybe that just becomes harder as technology evolves. Maybe that's a part of it as well. But
you kind of tie yourself to a certain educational identity, right? Like the idea that, let's say, I don't know, let's say you studied engineering in college, right? So your mindset is, well, I have to be an engineer, right? There's nothing wrong with a career shift. Just because that's what your degree is in, or what your experience or work experience is in, doesn't mean you're not capable of trying something new, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You see it all the time, and sometimes it's born out of a personal desire. Sometimes you're backed into a corner. Just depends on where life takes you. My brother went to school to be an engineer. He is now a pastor. He's a religious pastor.
Go. I think a lot of that does come down to our generation and our relationship to, let's say, our parents' generation, and how things were a bit more by the book then, right? Like there was maybe something a bit more strict about the way that education was designed to set you up for a career trajectory that you were meant to fulfill, right?
Yeah.
But there's more opportunities these days to be a bit creative with what you know and what you're passionate about. The avenues are just there. There's one YouTuber out there that I really like, that I won't name, who went to school for music and music performance and composition. Now he gives financial advice, and he has a show about financial advice. So like
you never know.
You never know.
Yeah, like Nate Parsons, who I co-founded In Session Film with, been on the show before, of course. He went to school for sports journalism, and now he is a third grade teacher.
See, like that's
he's
awesome.
teaching young kids. So like
That- I
that
mean,
that
that-
was his desire. Like his desire just changed and he decided to do something about it. I mean, I went to school for sports broadcasting. Nate and I went to the same college together. I am not doing sports broadcasting, I'll tell you that much. Not doing that.
I guess I'm the outlier because I went to school for energy, business, and finance. It was a business degree tailored to the energy market. And that's still exactly what I'm doing full time. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point maybe my full time job becomes more involved with music. So like
Yeah,
there might
that'd be
maybe
nice.
that shift will happen.
Yeah.
So
Never know. You
we're
never
creative
know.
people.
And
Our generation is we're not tied down. We're loose cannons.
Yeah.
We like to take
Yeah.
risks.
But to this film's point, sometimes you don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
And when the economics are as bad as they can be, as this film suggests, as we're living now, sometimes you don't have that luxury. And so you're forced to maybe play the game, even in a non-life and death situation as this film invokes. But still, sometimes that's where you're left if you don't have an education or you don't know where else to turn, or you just don't have the money to go to school or the money to change, which is another part of it. I mean, Nate had the resources, thankfully, to go back to school.
Yeah.
Some people don't. So it just, it depends from situation to situation. But if you're willing to let go of that ego and you're willing to submit yourself to something else, the opportunities are there for sure for a lot of people. And,
for sure.
I think, again, and going back to this film, I think it's fair to say that Mansu in those first 3 months had the opportunity to switch gears. They were financially stable enough to switch gears. I think the film makes that known enough, but he doesn't.
I mean,
He doesn't.
honestly, the fact that we were having a conversation like this, talking about our own personal histories with this kind of topic, despite the movie maybe being not very subtle about these things, proved that the movie was maybe working all along for both of us, right? That we brought our own experiences to this narrative, which it just goes to show how relatable it ultimately is.
Yeah, I found it immensely relatable for sure. Yeah, I was totally with the film in that regard in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And I could also see my own father in a lot of this in a lot of ways as well.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of universality to this. It's very funny. The craft is impeccable. I mean, to me, there's just so much to love.
This is
so much
a
to love.
great conversation for a movie that I ultimately came into a little more mixed on than you were. So, and I'm still not ready to say that I'm accepting it full stop now. I need to give it another go. But it did provoke a lot of great talking points, which is what a great movie should do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be curious. Like, again, I would not be surprised if the award show comes and this is all over your top 10 or your
I'm gonna
nominations.
I'm gonna feel bad about that because I already submitted my nominations to Dave. So
Well, I did as well because our team nominations were already due. But as far as the Incession Film Awards goes, that's
our quote unquote
another,
official nominations.
Yes,
yeah,
we still have a few weeks on that. It's going to change. Sorry, Dave. Mine is going to change.
Hey, we have
I
plenty
know
of
that.
writers that have seen more than we have at this point. So let's just say that they've done the proper homework and the right homework, and they have the knowledge to outweigh what we haven't seen just yet.
I hadn't seen everything either by the time we submitted those for the staff nominations.
Yeah.
I've seen more since then, and I think those are going to change a little bit.
Yeah,
not too much, but certainly a little bit for sure.
But I think if there's one film that's going to break the list, I'm not saying it's going to be this one. For all I know, I rewatch it and I say, you know what, I'm still not in love with it. But
That could happen.
It could happen.
That could also happen. Yeah. No, whenever we'll see. I guess we'll find out.
But this is maybe the one that's most likely to create a bit of a rift in what I initially submitted.
And it could be a little bit of both sides in the sense that you do come around on it. You do like it as far as this year is concerned, but it still isn't your favorite Park Chan-wook film. Like maybe you still prefer Decision to Leave and The Handmaiden to this, even if it does end up in your top. Like it could be both of those things at the same time.
I love how movies can be all things.
It could be all the things.
It could be
And
everything.
honestly, like that's probably where I'm at. In all honesty, like I love No Other Choice. I think it's really great. I probably prefer it to Decision to Leave, but I could see how for a lot of people that goes back and forth because Decision to Leave is also really great. And similarly to you, there are some complexities to that film that I'm still grappling with.
Okay.
But so much of that film is undeniable. Like that's really just like I still have that in my top 20 for its year. And I think on my current list it sits somewhere around 14. So like 14 or 15. So I still really like that film a lot. Not like it's that big of a difference. But yeah, I mean, No Other Choice. Like The Handmaiden is still my favorite.
The Handmaiden is one of the great movies of the 2010s.
Old Boy's still great. Yeah, like so. Yeah, I think it can very much be one of the best films of this year, and also not my favorite Park Chan-wook.
Park Chan-wook's good at his job,
but he's great.
and can
Yeah.
I also say, and this is not to knock any specific critics out there or anything like that, but I'm kind of glad that we went this entire conversation without naming Bong Joon-ho as a comparison. I have seen a lot of people out there make the comparison to Parasite with regard to this movie, just given its class themes in a way, but these movies are so different. And honestly, between these two filmmakers, Park Chan-wook and Bong Joon-ho, they have very different vibes, even if they both come from, South Korean cinema, and they have some similar, like, bizarre aesthetics that they tend to prioritize. But they have very different agendas and very different vibes that they bring to their respective movies. I mean, we just saw a Bong Joon-ho movie earlier this year that weirdly I think everyone's forgotten about with Mickey 17.
I know.
And I think that's kind of tragic because I quite like that movie.
Also good. Yeah.
Yeah. But you look at his movies, and this is something I love about Bong Joon-ho. This is not meant to be a backhanded compliment. His movies are kind of sloppy when compared to, someone like Park Chan-wook.
Yeah.
Park Chan-wook is certainly more formal. He's a more formalist filmmaker.
Yeah.
There's a lot more
yes.
precision. I was just about to use the word precision with regard to his movies. But that just creates a very particular distinction when compared between the two of them. And I just wanted to say, I've seen a lot of people make this comparison between Parasite and No Other Choice, but I think they are so different from what
I honestly, I don't think they're really all that much alike at all.
Yeah.
Like the classism that we see here is pretty muted. This film really isn't about classism.
Sure.
There's certainly an element of corporate greed and the idea that
and maybe the desire to participate in a certain social class. But like, that's,
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
But that's really where it begins and ends, I think.
I think so as well. Yeah. Mostly this film is about that feeling of being disposable, that feeling of a company demanding loyalty, but they are going to show no loyalty to you. Like that irony. Like that's where this film is operating. Parasite is operating in a very different realm.
Yeah.
And as you noted, Bong Joon-ho isn't the style of filmmaker that Park Chan-wook is. So
it's very different. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, not even better or worse, just different. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just because David Fincher and Steven Spielberg are Americans doesn't mean that their movies are alike. Like that's silly.
Yeah. Well, I do wonder if there's just less opportunities to expand as much as South Korean cinema offers when compared to American cinema. But at the same time, it's like these are very different filmmakers that just come from the same country.
And that's it. I mean, and there's also a lot of other South Korean media that just doesn't make it over here as prominently. Those are just two filmmakers that tend to get distribution in the United States. So, I mean, let's be a little bit more open-minded here, I guess is what I'm trying. Like those comparisons, I think are.
I mean, yeah. Like what's another great example? The movie I Saw the Devil, great South Korean movie from neither of these two filmmakers. Very different movie.
Yeah, very very different. Yeah. Like South Korea is always doing a lot of great work, and again, there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make it here, or it's not as noticeable, not as prominent. Same things with Chinese cinema, Japan cinema, French cinema. I'm currently taking French and Duolingo So my goal is to,
Interesting,
I
man.
want to be able to watch more French cinema without the subtitles. It's kind of my end goal there.
It's interesting you chose that. That's
yeah.
fun.
Yeah, well, it figured like there's no way I just don't feel like Japanese would be attainable. German maybe, but I feel like French cinema is more my speed.
If you already have a bit of maybe a relationship to that language a little bit, or you feel like you have some comfortability with it or something, I get that. Yeah, that's interesting. I think I'm with you. Like if I were to try to learn a second language, it might be either German or Spanish, just because I already have.
Well, Spanish. I'll be perfectly. Spanish is the most practical because I live in South Florida, for God's sakes.
Of course,
so, Spanish. And look, there's a lot of great Spanish and Mexican cinema as well. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. I just I really love a lot of French cinema. I'd love to be able to watch more. And so if I knew French, I feel like I'd partake more. But it also in a pragmatic level, it's dumb that I'm not doing Spanish. Because Spanish would I could use Spanish literally in my day-to-day life down here. So where I go to get my haircut, it's two old ladies that speak Spanish. That's their first language. They speak English, but when I'm there, they mostly speak Spanish, and they're lovely. They're great. I love talking to them, but that's like a day-to-day life thing, like a tangible thing where I could just go and speak Spanish to them, and I'm like, nope. French. That's what I'm doing.
Interesting one to pick. I love that though.
But I'm having fun. So
good for you, man.
Anyway, this is not a French movie. This is the Park Chan-wook movie. It's Korean, South Korean. Do you have any other thoughts? I know we're just rambling on now.
Once again, to be continued. I do want to give this one another go.
Yeah. I really love this one a lot. Again, I just want to emphasize that I love this as a comedy. I think it is biting, even if the satire isn't quote unquote new or something that we haven't seen before. But I do think the timing of it is interesting. I think the execution of it is quite fascinating. Again, very funny, but sophisticated. There's a lot of emotional nuance to this film that I do think is really great. It's not a straight up black and white slapstick comedy. There is a lot of great use of irony here. There are great emotional beats here. It's a very Park Chan-wook film. If you like his movies or you're familiar with them, you're going to get a lot of his usual ethos here. But the comedy is very much on the surface, and I think it's funneled just incredibly through that great filmmaking that you tend to love from him. So. One of my favorite films of the year. I don't know where this lands in my top 10 or top 20, but it's in the conversation. And I highly recommend it. Love this film a lot. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say, leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com. All right, as we wind down here, we have a review of... Well, there's a couple of reviews.
Actually, I was going to say, it's not just the one.
It's not just the one, yeah. I don't know the exact order as we are recording this, if I'm being perfectly honest. But we do have a couple of reviews this week. I do need to get Rental Family out. I've been sitting on that for some time. So Rental Family is coming out this week. The Testament of An Lee is the other one. That's the other big one that's coming out this weekend. So that one probably came out first. I'm not even sure. Is this one also coming out this weekend? Or has it already had its limited release? I'm not even sure. No other choice
specifically. I think it's. I think
it
has had
this weekend too.
It might be.
I think
that's a great question. Actually, I don't even know.
I think so because I put it on the calendar. I think I put it on this weekend for a reason. But I'm honestly not. Sure.
I know. I had it. Of course, I try to Google this, and it gives me its South Korean release, which was back in September. That doesn't help us.
I'm fairly certain it had a limited release. It had an IMAX only release on December 8th. That was earlier.
Apparently, it began its U.S.
Yeah, it's-
rollout in limited release on Christmas Day.
On Christmas. Yep, I do see that here. So yeah, I did have it
Okay,
on
so
this day for a
you-
weekend.
Ron, you were methodical about this.
I was methodical about it. So yes, No Other Choice and Lee have, like, both of them went out on Christmas Day as far as limited release goes. So this weekend they'll start to expand more and more. So you can go and see both of them, which is very exciting. Really fun. Rental Family is of course already out. It's in theaters. Go and check that one out. So we'll have those 3 reviews, and then on the main show this week, episode 668, we are doing our top 10 scenes of the year. Or at least we are beginning that. We're going to split them up 10 to 6, 5 to 1. Those will be our last 2 episodes before we do the award show on episode 670, which is very fun. So we're just a couple of weeks away.
I like that we're doing scenes this way this time around. Because
I'm very excited
we love
for it.
doing that. And that's always a stressful list. We always want to have room for more scenes to talk about. So this kind of gives it that edge for us, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it's very exciting. I'm going to be stressing out about this over the next few days.
You're welcome.
But I'm excited. Should be a lot of fun. Okay, with all that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Park Chan-wook. You don't miss.
He's good at his job.